Well, good afternoon, everybody, or whenever you're listening. This is Vince Easley. I'm coming with an off-grid journey for you today, or backtracking it. I've got the honor of standing in for Drew Lamb today here on UCY.TV, and I'd like to welcome you all along. So what I'm going to do is backtrack a little bit, this movement towards off-grid and what's the draw. Also going to do a little reflection on my life as a youngster at my grandma and grandpa's farm here in the hills of Arkansas as a kid back in the last part of the 60s. I've shared a little picture around of me as in some bib overalls and with some old hound dogs at my heels. But anyways, I hope my son will be listening now or later. And I'd like to be able to just share a little bit of myself with this today. So anyways, welcome everybody listening in chat now, and I'll drop in and say hi Beck, glad you made it over. And so what is a journey after all? I think we're all on a journey, aren't we? And sometimes our paths diverge. So with that being said, that's talking to my son. So a little bit nervous here. I haven't seen my son since he was a kid. Not much older than that picture there that I was in. And I'd like to be able to get to know him one day and can take that journey along then. So I was talking to a friend Tammy the other day, and I told her, when I started out on radio, I'd just be terrified fixing to come on for a good 6 months, and finally I just forgot. But I think that apprehension is probably, wanting to be able to present credible information and, be somebody you might want to listen to, because I do think I have a lot of good information to share, and how well I convey that might be argued, whether it be good or bad. But anyways, I'm glad y'all are along, and I'm just real proud to be here. Drew does a wonderful job. He's also on Double Crossed on radio on Thursday nights. These guys, Chuck and Drew, I mean, they're really at the foundation of doing things that, affect a positive change. And that's, I think, part of that desire and yearning that draws people back to an off-grid lifestyle. That's a, more simplistic times. And I think that reflects on society today, that there's a general dissatisfaction in the way the world works. And I, of course, have covered that pretty well on other episodes, whether it be on governments or conspiracy of people that control governments and society. But so today we're going to talk some about this journey. Now, you need a road, of course, unless you're a trailblazer. But this is something I've known about, and I've looked at a few sites, and I've decided to read this one here to you. And this has to do with why roads are as they are. And I found some other more good information, and that would go along with anarchy and, who would build the roads? That's the famous question. But anyways, a railroad track is the width of 2 horses, and this comes from Paul V. Hartman. American railroad tracks are 56.5 inches wide. That's the gauge. Because the English built the first railroads in America, they used that width. And why did they use that width? Because the first rail lines were built by the same people who built the railroad tramways, and that's the gauge they used. Why did they use that gauge then? Well, because the people who built the tramway used the same gauge and took that, were used for building wagons, which was used, and they used that wheel spacing. And why did let's see if I can unfumble my tongue here. Why did wagons have that particular odd wheel spacing? Well, and that's because older wagon ruts throughout England used that spacing. And if they changed it, the wagon wheels would break by either falling in or being forced out of the old ruts, which were 56.5 inches wide. Now, the old ruts were that size because the roads were built by the Romans, who arrived in England in about 54 BC and left about 400 AD. Their wagons and their chariots before their wagons used that spacing. And that spacing was used all over Europe and wherever Rome conquered. Because their wagons use that identical wheelbase everywhere, so the modern railroad track width derives from the Roman chariot. So why was the Roman chariot track 56.5 inches wide? Keeps asking the same question, doesn't he? Why? But ain't that what we all got, questions of why? I do anyways. But, okay, so because the width of that chariot would equal the width of 2 standard Roman horses, thus the wagon and horses would fit through the same narrow street. Specifications and bureaucracies live forever. What will we do without governance? Okay, so such curious dimensions continue today. And this is an interesting fact that I hadn't thought of, but I guess I would have, because I've loaded many rail cars and several hundred, probably into the thousands, of flatbed trailers from pipe for municipalities all across the country, from drinking water and sewage treatment to steel I-beam buildings, built and shipped, never lost a piece. And I've probably got, myself, I've got enough miles over the road in an 18-wheeler to go from here to the moon. So of all the thousands of trucks, I've probably got several million miles that I've sent down the road. So this is something that, I've thought on before of why, We'd back them gondolas in to the building and load them up, and down they'd go. You can ride a car down the track if you've got them wheels that'll drop down and hold you on the tracks. All the same width right there. So anyways, Mr. Hartman goes on to talk about the space shuttle sitting on its launch pad. It has 2 big booster rockets attached to the side of the main fuel tank. And these are solid rocket boosters, or SRBs, made by a factory in Utah. The engineers who designed them, they might have preferred to make them a bit fatter, but they had to be shipped by train from the factory to the launch site, and the railroad line, it's got tunnels and all, so they had to make accommodation. So if you ever wonder why, but of course now I think we're seeing what the Humvees, they got wider width, but for almost all the history of wheels of rolling down the road, unless they was bicycling, generally was the same width. So interesting there. So speaking of the horses now, that brings to mind a horsepower, right? Let me find where I'm at on that. So what is a horsepower? As soon as I find which link it is, I'll talk about it. There we go. There's one. I think I got one more. Yeah, that's working time. So okay, here we go. Now horsepower. Have you ever wondered about it? Everything's got an assignment of horsepower. From your lawnmower sometimes to your truck and your tractor. Interesting, a big tractor, it'll be about 100 horsepower, and a little one of them back in the 1940s, 80 Ford, they're somewhere around about 20 odd, maybe 25 horsepower, I believe it is. But let's see, where do I want to start at on this here. Okay, I'll start here. The story goes that Watt, we all know Watt. If you think of a light bulb, the 75-watt light bulb, you'll know who Watt is, or maybe you won't, but you will in a minute. So anyways, the story goes he was working with ponies lifting coal at a coal mine, and he wanted to know a way to talk about the power available from one of these animals. He found that on average, a mine pony could do 22,000 foot-pounds of work a minute. And he increased that number 50% and pegged the measurement of horsepower at 33,000 pounds of work in a minute. So yeah, that's divisible. We'll skip on down here. Of course, a horse ain't going to pull up 33,000 pounds by itself, but you have to equate that. So you can probably imagine that you'd not want to load 33,000 pounds, right? Let me see, skip on down. So that translates into about 375 miles per hour, and horses can't run that fast either. However, if you read how a block and tackle works, then you know that with a block and tackle, you can easily trade perceived weight for distance using arrangement of pulleys. Back in the old days, a lot of people had them pulleys up. They for any number of reasons, because we didn't have them, that power back in there, the availability of the equipment that most people have access today. In the 60s, even in the 70s, kids were cutting the grass with a push reel mower, no engine on it, which is foot power, I guess, right? Now, 1 horsepower is equivalent to 746 watts. So if you figure 75-watt light bulb, that's 10 light bulbs, right? So if you took a 1 horsepower horse and put it on a treadmill, it'd operate a generator producing that many watts. 1 horsepower over the course of an hour is equivalent. Oh, okay, I thought I might have had something wrong, but is equivalent to 2,545 BTUs, which is a British thermal unit. And if you took that 746 watts and ran it through an electric heater for an hour, it would produce 2,545 BTUs. And that is the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 pound of water 1 degree. If you think about it, even with the the pollution and the fossil fuels, that's another issue. There's a lot to that, but if you look at it, really, it's pretty cheap to think about. If you can imagine a truck going cross country loaded down with an 80,000 pound gross, a freight hauler, he might get upward to anywhere from 7, 8, 9 miles a gallon diesel fuel, and some of them big trucks, some old fast trucks, you might be looking at 5 miles to a gallon. So, if you start adding dollars, of course, that adds up. But relatively, that is incredibly cheap power. Unfortunately, it's also death. But again, that's probably another subject. All right, now relating over to foot power, or to, let me get over here. Okay, to the equivalence of a human. I got somebody messing with me on Skype there. Let me take a look at that real quick. It's Walter. Hello, Walter. Are you listening? It went well. You're not listening, I don't guess. And I will send him a message. Okay. I hope you'll come on along, Walter. So. I've still got this upper respiratory, so I'm pretty hoarse. Speaking of horses, not the same horsepower I'm talking about now. Okay, so power, definition and mathematics of work. The quality of work has to be done with a force causing a displacement. Work has nothing to do with the amount of time that this force acts to cause the displacement. Sometimes the work is done very quickly, and other times it's done rather slowly. Now we're going to drop down. Power equals work time, or P equal W/T. The standard metric unit of power is the watt, as implied by the question for power. A unit of power is equivalent to the unit of work divided by unit of time. Thus, a watt is equivalent to a joule second. And that is 750 watts, and that's a horsepower. Let's see, where was it talking about the feller, what he could do? Anyways, you can just imagine we're nowhere near as strong as a horse. I won't go back here so I can kind of take a little reflection and wander back. I told you I was going to talk a little bit about life as a kid. Now, that picture there in my old bib overalls, I reckon I was probably about 4 or 5 years old right there, probably about 1968. And that's my grandma and grandpa's farming in Arkansas. In behind over there, across the pasture and over a barbed wire fence and beyond was a schoolhouse. It was a 2-story. I think there was maybe 8 rooms in it all together. And kids went to school of all grades together. That was back in the old days. I turned 50 this year and wouldn't think it, but I guess I'm an antique. You're only as old as you feel. But anyways, on my grandpa's farm, that they had all the things of everyday life. And if you're going off grid today, these are the old-fashioned things is what you're out for today. Now, he had a smokehouse. He had a tack room, had a well house. Of course, the barns and stables around. Gardening, he plowed it, put his garden in with the team of mules or Jack and Jenny or horses. He's a horse trader, and so it was whatever he was had then. But he, as there wasn't a lot of money back in them days, people did a lot more trading, and that's part of the draw, I believe, on the off-grid movement. Also, is to disconnect some from society of today for a simpler way of living. He put in 5 acres of field corn, producing all the feed for the animals through the year, hay and all that. That goes back to saying it was a lot of work, right? It ain't like today. People talk about the good old days. Man, there wasn't air conditioning or refrigeration. Even as I was a kid, we had an outhouse, and I remember when we got a bathroom put in my grandma and grandpa's there. What a deal that was. So let's look in at refrigeration. Well, there's alternatives, of course. Many different methods of preserving your food, and we'll go on to that. But about refrigeration and freezers, before mechanical refrigerator systems were introduced, people cooled their food with ice and snow, either found locally or brought down from the mountains. The first cellars were holes dug in the ground and lined with wood or straw and packed with snow and ice, and this was the means of refrigeration for most of history. Can you imagine? Life has been pretty much the same throughout millennia up until, the relative recent history, 100 and some odd years ago. So what refrigeration is, and if you're like me, you call a refrigerator an ice box, but I don't know why. That was just, that's what it was called when I was a kid, and I come up saying it myself. So anyways, it's a process of removing heat from an enclosed space or from a substance to lower its temperature. Refrigerator uses the evaporation of a liquid to absorb heat. So what you got on a refrigerator, you've got a compressor, and some gases obviously work better than others, comparing, say, Freon to, air. So the compressor on a refrigerator compresses this gas, and when it releases it, it's like if you ever turned on a propane boiler, on your barbecue grill, and you see that frost and condensation build up. That's what's going on there. That's the same type of process you'll see in your refrigerating unit. In the beginning, I think some of the first liquids they used, or gases that was chlorine. No, I can't recall, but it'll come back to me. Anyways, so there was the old fella'd come around, and have a box out on the porch, and they'd deliver ice. You can get your milk delivered and all that stuff, depending on if you was in the city. But things were a whole lot different, a lot simpler, and I think a more honest time. So we're going to move to, I'm going to skip that one and come back. Some of the reasons why the draw. And not that one, I'm coming back here. Okay, life before air conditioning. How in the world do people deal with the summer heat without air conditioning? Can you imagine? Lots of ways, both time-tested and experimental. Cooling homes was not the intended purpose when Willis Carrier, you've heard of Carrier air conditionings, invented the modern air conditioning in 1902. The earliest air conditionings were for industrial quality control. The comfort of the workers was incidental. However, artificial climate control made steel and glass skyscrapers practical. Home air conditioning became widely available after World War II and ushered in the age of suburban tract housing. It also spelled the demise of some old-fashioned architectural details and social customs. You know, like sitting out on the porch with the hand fan and drinking iced tea, if you was lucky enough to had the forethought of putting you some ice in the ground during the winter, save for them hot summer days. So I look at some of these architectural details after the jump. Some great pictures here. This comes from mentalfloss.com articles, life dash air conditioning conditioning. It's pretty cool pictures right there. Let me just, in case y'all want to come look at these, let me grab this right here and drop it off in the chat for y'all. Hey, Arco. How you doing, Mike? And let me go back. Well, oh, there it is. Okay. So, I don't know if y'all been in your city the whole life, and I don't expect there's too many people that ain't been traveled that ain't seen some of these houses in here. Pretty nice looking. Then you've got the old-fashioned there. You know, you've got your dugouts. That, of course, earth sheltering is a very effective means of regulating that thermal mass heat, you know, where it's not lost. It's regulated by thermal coupling, making it less extremes to cool and heat. And we see these types of designs today in used by people going off-grid, whether it be cob housing, straw bale housing. I've heard stories that there are 100-year-old schoolhouses like up in the prairies in Nebraska, you know, built out of straw, still standing today. Hey, that looks public school building right there. That looks almost pretty close to the first schoolhouse I went to as a young kid there in Arkansas. And there's a picture of life on the front porch, sitting in the porch swing, and the youngsters. Simpler times, weren't it? Okay. Now, I wish I'd ordered these things a little bit bigger. I'll pull these up for notes for discussion. I think we're going to get to some water pumps, but let's look at life on the farm. Back in the 1800s, about 1862, a lot of people in the East were driven to go west after they opened the Homestead Act. You had to go out and you could prove up on 160 acres, which is a quarter section. A section is a square mile, which is 640 square acres. And at the end of the time of proving it, they'd paid $1.25 an acre. And can you imagine Seward bought Alaska from Russia for, I believe it was 6 cents an acre way back then? So there was definitely a harsh and an isolating environment, right? The woes faced by farmers transcended economies. Nature was unkind in many parts of the Great Plains. Blistering summers and cruel winters were commonplace. Frequent drought spells made farming even more difficult. Insect blight raged through some regions, eating further into the farmer's profit. Up there in northwest Arkansas, where my family's from since 1850, there was at one time a lot of apples and other fruit tree orchards up there, and a blight come in and wiped them out back around during World War II, just right before or after. It was really a thriving economy there. Railroad tracks, shipped these fruits throughout the country. At one time it was famous for strawberries and tomatoes. Anyways, life changes, doesn't it? And here we are in the modern world. Most people are, just in that everyday struggle, fighting to survive the life, right, and provide. But back in them good old days, man, wasn't it a whole lot harder? Or was it? Or was there more satisfaction? I come across this. This is This came out about them times and when people were traveling, and it's a song from Abby Hutchinson, and it goes. I'm not going to sing it, but it goes something like this: If I were a voice, a pervasive voice that could travel the wide world through, I'd fly on the beams of the morning light and speak to men with a gentle might, and I'd tell them to be true. I would fly over the land and sea, where their human heart might be, telling a tale or singing a song in praise of right and blame of wrong. If I were a voice, if I were a voice. So I kind of am a voice, and that's why I'm doing here talking, even in the hoarse voice. No horsepower today. So let's see where I'm at now. Well, I should probably X these out when I'm done with them. Let's see about some of this here. This comes from trueactivist.com. And 15 tips for going off grid. What do you love and stop being a debt slave? That is something to draw, right? So you decided it's time to explore an alternative way of living. Off-grid refers to living in homes that are autonomous, meaning they do not rely on municipal water supply, sewer, natural gas, electrical power grid, or similar utility services. A true off-grid house is able to operate completely independently of all traditional public utility services. So that's kind of the definition of what off-grid is today, right? And there's a pretty picture. So number one, what you love. I'm just going to list 15. Live small and get rid of your debt. You do not need to work for someone else. You'll have plenty of work to do yourself. This is not about responsibility. Okay, no one is saying that you should shirk your duties as a provider for your family. But look, actually, if you're there at home and providing in that way, you can be certain of what it is your family's ingesting, right? Like Drew with his aquaponics. He's producing some high quality food with you don't have to worry about any residue from chemical fertilizer or pesticides, herbicides, any outside contaminant falling upon it. So that's something I still have not got started, but something I want to do. At least to start with a small one, grow a salad or something. Seeing where you can just have your regular aquarium and have it produce enough, the nitrogen from your fish waste to at least grow you a salad. So, goes on to say, number 5, your job is your family. And number 6 says you can go off grid. And there are some steps you can take now that would allow you to go off grid sooner. I mean, it does take a lot of planning. You just can't just up and walk out the front door and go off and pitch a tent. Or maybe you can. I've done it. I did it, coupled myself to the ground last year for quite some time. And I'll tell you what, it's really good to reconnect, to re-energize, and get your energy field lined up. So anyways, number 7 is to reduce your expenses. 8, save money, and 9, to sell your old stuff. Reclaim and recycle building materials. There's example after example of people building their homes out of what they pulled out of dumpsters. There's an incredible amount of waste in this world of, our just-in-time disposable society. So, like I said, there's any number of methods of building, whether cob. I think cob's a pretty good method. Rammed earth, sod, straw bale, lots and lots of methods. A person, just think about the house payment. Okay, now to make that house payment, you've got to have a job, and to have that job, you've got to have a car, which requires another payment. I mean, what do you figure? Most people in the normal aspect of society, what is how much of their labor, how much of their horsepower goes to, just providing to be able to have the job and to pay the bills? And if you could back out of that, how much better off could you be? Or perhaps it might be incorporated into early retirement. And you know, the way the future and the economy and society looks, you know, there's not really any guarantee, is it? That your Social Security retirement is always and continually being threatened. So even being on grid, a partial off grid understanding or comprehension and implication, implementing some plans to be able to live thus so, it just makes sense. Now, even with a power outage, you know, have you got a coal oil lamp? Just good preparedness. So, just in case. So you got to be willing to relocate, build, buy, or buy a log cabin or tiny house. Man, there's some good tiny houses. You can search out on YouTube. Look at tiny houses. Pretty incredible. You know, like, well, I forget how many square feet, but figure a 14 by 60 foot trailer is probably like pretty close to 1,000 square feet. And I think a boy's probably packing in like 600 square feet and just a little low, no bigger than a shed with the loft upstairs as his bedroom. So you got to learn how to grow your own food, being off grid. So go back to school and learn something new about what you love. And this has over 40 educational websites. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to grab that link and drop it off in case you want to look at it. Hello, JC. Who forgot to plug in? I hope I'm being heard. I reckon I am. Let me do a little test here. Tell me, do you hear me now? Of course, I've not been in here and chat keeping up with you. Yeah, I'm pretty hoarse, huh, Beck? So obviously you do hear me. Now, let's see. We'll X that one out. Next that one out. There's water. Coming back to water. What was this one here? Yeah, that was the mental floss on air conditioning. Excuse me. Pardon me just one sec. I'll be glad for this stuff finally get out of my chest. So this is from Off Grid Journey, but not our Off Grid Journey, but on WordPress, another site there, and they're also on Facebook. I think they go by another name there. I know Drew's page is called Off Grid Journey. And this one here, if I recall, has just a little different name there. But anyways, in a nutshell, what is it to be off grid? And this is offgridjourney.co. But not, let me say it again, not our off grid journey. I'll populate this list as I think of more things, he says. This is pretty short, but I thought it was kind of interesting anyways that people are talking about this. There's forums everywhere, so it's not hard to be able to get involved with some folks that would discuss that. And I invite you to Facebook, Off Grid Journey there, and you can also find her on the web. Okay, here we go. It is a twist in a civilized world that we now long to disconnect. We have been trained by our power tools that on battery power, cordless tools are just as good as our corded ones. This must make us crave to have the battery power in our cars and our homes and more in our lives. So, as long as we as we long to disconnect, we will find better ways to do so and improve our lives in the process through a reconnect with the beautiful surroundings God gifted us with. Isn't that really what it is? We feel like there's a disconnect in society today, and we're looking for something that feels right. There's all numbers of means of producing your own power, of course, and of course the very best ones are technology that's not generally available, but there is an incredible amount of alternative ways of producing power. People are experimenting with these days, and even what many would suppose to be impossible, that is nearly a perpetual motion with the alternator and a generator, which it does require some electronics. But I've seen it on YouTube, and I'm going to make the assumption that that they do work. So, but how do you get more power out of something you put in? That's supposed to be not a scientific possibility. But anyways, some of the choices that generally are available are self-generated power. That is solar, wind, gas, or natural gas generator. You got a water wheel, electric water pump by solar, windmill water pump, making home from the land. It says natural trees, mud, corn, cob from the land, rocks, grows own food through a garden, greenhouse, has chickens for eggs, goats for milk, cows for milk, and meat and other livestock, cooks by fire. I've got a wood stove in here. That's what I heat with and cook with. Cooks by electric off of sustainable power source, cooks by gas or propane. Boy, that's some sophisticated stuff we're talking about. And recycles and reuses what is available in the area. So they've got a worker going here, and salute to them. There's more content, but you might find them on WordPress if you like. This is the one I think I was looking for, wasn't it? Or was it? No, I believe this is one I already read. Yeah, we'll leave that one. Okay, now we're going to get into, let's talk about an overview. Here it comes from homepreservable.com, an overview of 10 home food preservation methods from ancient to modern. So, of course, if you're going to produce your food, it'd do you no good to stack it in the corner and it spoil on you, right? Excuse me a sec. Okay, so we have these 10 in a list here. And I believe these were taken by the Home Preserving Bible, and I believe I'll find a list at the bottom of this. So canning is a process of heating the product at a specified temperature for a specific length of time, and that is pasteurizing what it is you're hoping to preserve, and then vacuum sealing the processed pasteurized food, that is, in a special glass jar designed for the purpose. It can be used with most foods, including fruits, vegetables, meat, seafood, and some prepared foods. Canning requires the purchase of reusable canning jars and rings, one-time use sealing lids, and some practice to learn the necessary and detailed steps. Some types of canning require to be done so under pressure in a pressure cooker. Others you can do it in a hot water bath, and then there's what's called cold packing and sauerkraut. My dad used to make a cold pack of sauerkraut. Man, I loved it. I'd eat about a quart every week of that stuff. And cabbage, by the way, is a very, very good food for you. Even in fermented, which fermented foods are also another aspect of healthy flora for your stomach. Important. Number 2 is freezing, and is a process of chilling foods to at least 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and it can be used with all foods, including fruits, vegetables, meat, seafood, grains, nuts, dairy, eggs, and prepared foods. True freezing is not possible in the freezer compartment of your refrigerator, where the temperature is typically much warmer, between 10 to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Freezing is easy to do if you can afford to buy and operate the relatively expensive appliance. Well, I disagree. There's your chest freezer and even your freezer above your ice box. Funny story. Buddy of mine, miss you, Frankie. I says, hey, put this in the ice box for me, will you? And so I go to look for it later, and I'm looking all down there in the refrigerated part of the unit there, and I said, Frankie, what'd you do with that? And he said, I put it in the freezer. And I said, what'd you do that for? He said, you said put it in the ice box. I guess that made sense to me after hearing it back. But for, typically if you want to, like if you butcher a cow, or, any of your livestock, you're generally going to take it to the butcher, and they're going to process it and freeze it where you don't have the capability to do than that. So I believe that may be what they might be implying there. Drying is a process of dehydrating foods until there's not enough moisture to support microbial activity. And that can be used with most foods, including fruits, vegetables, meats, seafoods, grains, legumes, and nuts. There are several different techniques. Some are relatively easy to do and require no special equipment. Here we go to the fermenting. Fermented food is good. I do like it. And you know what is really good is kimchi, and it's hard to find without MSG in it, though, isn't it? So, commercially, that is. And that is the process of encouraging the growth of good bugs to inhibit the bad bugs that can spoil food. It can be used with many types of foods, including fruits, vegetables, meats, seafood, grains, legumes, dairy, and eggs, to produce a wide range of products, such as wine from grapes, sauerkraut from cabbage, cured sausage, some of sausages and stuff in the meats, yogurt from milk, and many fermented products can be produced without any special equipment, other than a crock or something like that, even in jars. The method for each type of product is relatively easy, but requires additional detail. Pickling. I recall back in the 80s out in California, up in trimming as a tree trimmer, and went all over the state and got up around Lindsay, and to this day, boy, I love it, Lindsay olive. But this fella, this is down in Southern California, though. He olive trees just grow like weeds out there. But anyways, he pickled his own olives, had a big old crock out there in his backyard. That actually, those was, I think, a little different than pickling. Maybe it was kind of salting, a little different process. Anyways, pickling is a process of soaking food in a solution containing salt, acid, or alcohol, and it can be used with most food, including fruits, vegetables, meats, seafoods, legumes, and eggs. Pickled eggs. Hey, who don't like that with a cold beer on a Saturday night? Out around the campfire, huh? Most methods require no special equipment. However, pickled foods can be unsafe if prepared carelessly or stored at room temperature. Pickling is often combined with another method such as fermenting or canning, or just refrigerating. Dry salting is is either a fermenting or a pickling technique used for meat, fish, and vegetables. A low salt concentration, 2.5 to 5% weight of the salt per weight of the food, promotes fermentation. And so this is almost, well, it would be a wet salting, I guess, what he did with the olives. But and it promotes fermentation, while a high salt concentration, 20 to 25%, prevents microbial growth and preserves the food in a more or less fresh, although salty taste. You used to salt fish, back when they'd go out to sea and without a method of preserving it. Otherwise, it is full. A lot of people ate pickled herring and so forth. Let's see. Most people are familiar with the technique considered salted vegetables, such as green beans, to be far superior in taste and texture than canned or frozen beans. The old-fashioned method was promoted in the early 20th century as an alternative to canning in order to conserve glass, tin, and fuel in the time of war. Curing is similar to pickling and uses salt, acid, and or nitrates. And boy, we know today nitrates are not a good thing in too much quantity. But it's used for meat and fish, and simple modern curing methods often reduce the amount of salt and nitrates, which may require that you refrigerate or freeze the final product. Shelf-stable products require the use of adequate amounts of nitrates in a complex drying process using special equipment and exacting technique. Some curing methods also employ secondary process such as fermenting, smoking, or sealing. There's also smoking. My grandpa had a smokehouse. That was part of it. You know, in the fall, you'd have hog killing, which required, you know, you kill the hog in big, like a witch's brew vat, built a fire around it, and dip your hog in there and scrape the hairs off, and then you'd hang your hog and either smoke it, or you'd have to wait till, you know, cold weather when it wouldn't get above freezing, and so it wouldn't spoil, so you'd hang your meats. You know, these days, and my uncle, he said many years ago, you know, he said that really the environment, the climate that is so much different today that you get above freezing all throughout winter, man. It's crazy weather, right? Used to, there would be a maintained freezing temperature, you know, through certain months of the year. So anyways, you've got curing and the smoking. Sealing, it's a process of covering food to keep out air. Now, I recall in the Swiss Family Robinson, reading that book, when a big old whale had washed up on shore, they harvested out the fat and then rendered it down, which is, you know, heating it and melting it down. And of course, with hogs, you'd render the hog fat too, and you'd come off with them cracklings in there. Boy, and you put that some cornbread. That was good. I remember that as a kid. My grandma would make that. But it's the process covering food to keep air out, which delays but does not stop the activity of spoilage organisms. It's used primarily as a complementary process to other methods such as drying or freezing. Both fat sealing and vacuum sealing methods are relatively easy. Vacuum sealing is a relatively inexpensive small appliance. Yeah. And the seller is number 10. In the process of storing food in a temperature, humidity, and light-controlled environment, it can be used with many foods, especially vegetables, grains, and nuts, as well as fermented food and dry cured meats. There are many different methods for cellaring food, all of which are relatively easy to do. Some require simple and inexpensive equipment, and you may already own, no matter where you live, whether in an apartment or in a farm. You can use the concept of cellaring to some degree. And he lists here, for more information about food preservation methods and recipes, you can see the book, The Home Preserving Bible by Carol Kanzler. Available from booksellers everywhere. I'm going to click that. You can grab the link up. There it is. So in case anybody's interested. And you might even find a search with your favorite search engine and find a PDF perhaps. I noticed the internet's a wonderful thing. Mr. Cooper, I'm glad you're here. How are you today? My favorite Nazi. Just kidding. You are my favorite Nazi, though. We got a wonderful bunch of chatters. So about the book, why this book? In the past, people preserved food because they had to, unlike today. They lacked a year-round supply of fresh food and mechanical refrigeration in times of pestilence, war, famine, tsunamis, and earthquakes. People simply wanted to make sure they had some food put by. They figured out what worked even before they knew how or why it did. Wow. Pardon. They preserve food mostly by trial and error, yet the diversity of cleverness of the methods they used is astonishing. Now I think it's time we've revisited some of these methods, and as we did. So, Part 1 describes the techniques, and Part 2 features over 300 recipes with media mentions, all listed right there. So, for your perusal. Where are we at now? You know, I did a search for backtracking the off-grid journey, and if you type in off-grid, at least in my search engine, it always brings me to a wonderful place, and that's right here at ucy.tv. Wonderful programming here, if I can use that word, programming, maybe deprogramming. I think that's what we're more about here. Those deprogramming. That old picture I posted up there of me as a kid, I wasn't, my first gun I had was an old BB gun that the barrel would shoot out of it, cock it, and my great uncle down the road had turkeys, and they'd come down there and get in the feed room, and just, boy, they were terror. They'd try to flog me, so I got to where I can get out there and run them turkeys off and pop that barrel out at them. And a couple years later, I reckon probably about 6 years old. And you can't imagine this in this day and age, but you know, to give a kid that age a gun and go off by himself out in the woods. And my uncle always had a good tree dog, so I've spent a lot of times out in the woods in my whole life. I love it. It's good solace there. Kind of getting close to the end, where some methods that I might thought about talking about, we may not probably get to, but water, of course, is one of the most important aspects of life. You can't live without it. There's this comes from www.fao.org/DOCREP, and then a bunch of forward slashes. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So it's FAO Corporate Document Repository, and I have a suspicion that a person may find a great deal of information here. Hey, look at there. Coop dropped the link in for the Home Preserving Bible, Living Guides. Thank you, Cooper. Oh, so there's that link there, and let me go back to it. Water lifting devices and techniques. Principles for lifting and moving water. I've got a well out here, and I'm still... Drew talked me, kind of put some doubt in my mind. I was going to use some air pressure to raise small amounts of water up through, using a fish aquarium air pump. He says the column would probably collapse at the depth of when I'm trying to raise it, but he suggested I use a check valve in it. So instead of just throwing money at it, I thought I'd think more about it. I guess what I really got is a rope in a well bucket. Anyways, so water may be moved by the application of any one or any combination of 6 different mechanical principles, which are largely independent, i.e. by direct lift. And this involves physically lifting water, okay? Drop a bucket down a well on a rope and pull it up, right? Displacement. And this involves utilizing the fact that water is effectively incompressible, and it can therefore be pushed or displaced, creating a velocity head. No, I'm sorry, I ran that together. Being pushed or displaced. And then that number 3 is creating a velocity head. When water is propelled to high speed, the momentum can be used either to create a flow or create a pressure. In shallow wells, there's what's known as a jet pump. And, of course, you have to have water at the top to get that started, because you have to have a prime. And what that does is that pumps the water, and it's kind of the same principle as airlift, but it pumps the water down the well. A venturi, your foot valve is at the bottom. You've got 2 pipes, one going down and one for coming back up. So the water pushes down. Part of it blows out, but that venturi effect then causes water to be pushed back up. And that is called creating a velocity head, jet pump, foot valve, venturi. Anybody familiar with gold dredging will know about the venturi system of moving water, which can actually pick up, rocks and gravel and hopefully a little gold. Right? Number 4 is using. Wow, we're about out of time. Using the buoyancy of a gas, and that's what I was talking about. Air or other gas bubbled through water will lift a portion of the water, and then gravity. Gravity flows downward under the influence of gravity. Now, that goes into a hydraulic ram pump. You can raise 25% of your water 10 times the amount of fall. And what that does is run water down. It runs through a valve which kicks out part of it, and then a seal comes in, pressure pushes up, you got check valves, and anyways, it moves on up. I'm trying to hurry up here. We're about out of time. I'll come back over to chat. I guess I've covered all I can. Listen, we've got more great radio today. We have, excuse me, Hal Anthony follows, one of the best men on radio, guaranteed. And if you're listening downstream, come back to ucy.tv. Use your search and come on along. Find some more great stuff. Let me go get my list. I can probably cite it offhand as often as I post it, but just to make sure there's no mistakes, I'd like to tell you what we got. That is Mr. Hal Anthony coming up in just a couple of minutes. As soon as I get off, I'll go post for him and go over and share the World Truth. Great site over there, unlike Facebook that seems to not censor. Following Mr. Hal Anthony behind the woodshed is Truth or Talk with a couple of great gals, April and Verstein. Today is episode number 90. Even the crazies need a voice. This is going to be a good one, right? Followed by Dr. George Simon of Character Matters. Dr. Simon is one of the foremost authorities on the art of manipulation and disturbances of character and personality. And I believe he'll take your calls on air. Later tonight at 10 p.m. on the East Coast, hey, put on some headphones and crank it up. If you're ready to get politically erect, or that's not quite right, but they're bringing it proper for the politically erect, some hip-hop, all power to the positive. And one of the best shows that going on, I love Nathan Frazier. Man, I learn a lot from him, for sure. Another one of the greats. That's coming up, 11 p.m. on the East Coast. Big show.